Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Nova Scotia with an announcement, but the main issue appears that he's facing right now remains China's interference in Canada's election. Now, to talk about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us from Palm Springs, California. Escaped the snow, did you, Brian?
For a little while, yes. Getting away for March break for a bit of warmer weather. Unfortunately for the Prime Minister, he can't escape this issue of China's attempts to interfere in our election. And yeah, he was doing a business investment announcement in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. And of course, it followed him there. It wasn't the dominant issue, but it was the first question he was asked. And, you know, it was about, can Canadians continue to have faith in our democracy? And would he call for a public inquiry, which polls show the majority of Canadians want, even if his special rapporteur doesn't call for one? It was interesting that he's not throwing around the term special rapporteur, which he does with an accent and flourish every time he says the word. He wasn't using it quite the same. So maybe he's realized that term doesn't sit well or isn't easily understood by a lot of Canadians. It's not a feature of our government system. So he seemed to be backing away from that, but sticking to the message that, look, we've got this process in place. We're going to follow the process. We are determined to ensure the safety, and you can be rest assured that everything was fair in our elections. That's not how Canadians are feeling. Even if they think the overall election result wasn't thrown by China's attempts to interfere, they still want to know what happened. And Justin Trudeau and his Liberal Party seemed determined to make sure we never find out what happened.
Brian, the Procedure and House Affairs Committee of the House of Commons began a meeting with opposition MPs trying to force a vote on having Trudeau's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, to testify. And the Liberals don't want Telford to take the stand.
No, they don't. Let me give you a basic rundown. This has been going on since the first week of March. The Conservatives, the NDP, and the Bloc all agreed on this motion. They've been trying to get it to a vote at this committee since the first week of March. And the Liberals at this point have spent more than 12 hours filibustering, just trying to make sure that this never happens. So Tuesday morning, another committee meeting started at 11 a.m. Eastern, scheduled to go until 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll see when they finally do break. But the Liberals are just determined to ensure that Katie Telford doesn't testify. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. They don't want anyone to know what is going on. What are they so afraid of Katie Telford saying at this committee? So, House of Commons committees are incredibly powerful tools. They have the ability to look at sensitive information in secure manners. They can have the law clerk of the House of Commons redact any documents that come forward that have information that shouldn't be made public. But the Liberals don't want that. They don't want documents revealed. They don't want Katie Telford to testify. By the way, as part of the compromise to get Telford to testify, it would also include senior Conservative campaign officials. The Conservatives said, yeah, call our people. The Liberals don't want that. And remember, the original allegation was that it was Liberals and Conservative candidates who were helped by China's consulate in Beijing. So the Conservatives know that this could hurt them, and they're still doing it. And of course, I've spoken to people, did a podcast that was released this week, speaking to Michel Junot-Katsuya. He says every party will be hit by this. And yet the only party that doesn't want an investigation at an inquiry or at a House of Commons committee is the Liberal Party. They want all of this dealt with in secret, behind closed doors, and just hope the Canadians trust them. I don't think that's the way it will work or should work.
Brian, last week allegations of China's interference extended to Ontario's legislature. A sitting member of provincial parliament at Queen's Park, Vincent Cobb, was named as part of the alleged foreign interference network. Brian, you spoke with Cobb about this. What did he have to say?
I spoke with him in person about this back in November, because when that initial story was published by Global News and they said 11 candidates, they also said that a sitting member of the Ontario legislature helped facilitate this, along with the Chinese consulate in Toronto. So the 2019 allegation is just in the Toronto area. And of course, we know that there have been MPs targeted elsewhere across the country. So being based just down the street from Queen's Park, I went over to the legislature and approached Mr. Ke. I believe the date was November 17th. There was a whisper campaign saying, oh, he's the guy that they didn't mention in the global report. And I just asked him straight up several times, were you involved? He said no. I spoke to his lawyer at length. He's a prominent lawyer in legal and political circles in Toronto. And he verbally and in writing gave blanket denials to very specific questions. So they're on the record as saying this did not happen. When this news broke, Premier Ford stripped him of his role as a parliamentary assistant. By the end of last Friday, the day that this came out, he was out of the PC caucus. That's a marked difference from how Justin Trudeau has dealt with a similar case of one of his sitting MPs, Han Don, being named in this same alleged foreign interference network. Trudeau just defended Don and said, look, he's a great member of our caucus. If you remember when it first came out, he said to ask questions about it was racist, but he's kept Don in his caucus. He has kept him as part of his team and refused to do anything. So Ford said, all right, you're out until your name is cleared. Trudeau said, nope, you stay in. Very different reaction from the two leaders.
So, Brian, the allegations of China's interference not only extended to Queen's Park in Ontario, but you figure it's also made its way to Alberta?
I think that most major provinces, maybe some of the smaller ones like the Atlantic provinces, we're going to find out that China has tried to interfere. Now, is it at the provincial level? Is it at the municipal level? Alberta has vast natural resources that, of course, China wants to be a part of. The extraction, they want to be the ones that get the exports. You remember their takeover of Nexen many years ago. China has tried to be a player in the oil sands. That's been going on for a long time. So, when I speak to security and intelligence folks, they say, look, you're going to see this at the municipal level, provincial, and federal, and it's going to hit every party. So, when this claim about Vincent Ke came out in Ontario, I put questions to the office of Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Do you have faith in our provincial elections? Does there need to be an investigation? They haven't answered that. There's no specific allegation that Ontario's elections have been interfered with or tampered with in any way. There aren't any specific allegations about Alberta, but I will not be shocked if that comes out. Now, I think one thing to stress here is even if somebody got assistance from Beijing, we can't automatically assume that they're an agent of Beijing. And I'll give you an example. We know that in British Columbia, and it's going to hit BC as well, in British Columbia, Conservative MP Kenny Chiu was defeated because Beijing wanted him out. He was tough on China's crackdown in Hong Kong. He wanted a foreign agents registry. He was a supporter of Taiwan. They wanted him out of there. They sought to defeat him. He was defeated by liberal Parm Bains, who is South Asian. He's Indian, descent at least. I'm not thinking for a second that Parm Bains is somehow an agent of China, even if his campaign got indirect assistance. I don't know that they put any money into his campaign or volunteers, but they did target Kenny Chiu, and so he's the indirect beneficiary. So we need to remember that they're just trying to influence policy. They're not everyone involved or who benefits is necessarily a spy or an agent of Beijing.
Brian, Calgary MP George Chahal says any attempt to look into foreign interference cannot stop minorities from participating in politics, nor should it. Now, is he saying, as the PM suggested, that it's racist to ask questions?
Kind of went up to the line on that, I'd say. Wasn't as blatant as the PM was a couple of weeks ago. I think the Liberals are realizing that doesn't fly with Canadians, and it especially doesn't fly with the Chinese Canadian community, who are out warning, don't listen to this line that asking questions about this or pushing for more information is racist. They say that is the line that Beijing uses to try and shut down any dissent. That is what the people who are aligned with Beijing will continue to say. Don't listen to this idea that it's racist. Last week, before this, the Ethics Committee on Parliament Hill, there was a number of people from the Chinese Canadian diaspora who appeared. There was one gentleman who says he's been fighting China's interference since the 90s in Canada and said this is their standard operating procedure. And by the way, we are the biggest targets and victims of China's interference in Canada. One of the things that's come out is the idea that someone like Kenny Chiu or Alice Wong or Bob Soroya, three MPs that we know were targeted on the Conservative side in the last election, part of how they lost, people were intimidated not to vote for them. People were basically worried that if they were seen going to the voting booth because they were known to support a Conservative, that they were fearful for their family back home because that message was out there. So, you know, Chinese Canadians, Uyghur Canadians who don't consider themselves Chinese at all, but they're governed by China or their relatives back home are, they are also targeted. So, you know, these are the victims. We can't say, let's not talk about it because we don't want to discourage people from being involved when Chinese Canadians and Uyghur Canadians are saying, ask more questions, get to the bottom of this and stop the interference.
Brian, bottom line here, is the recent controversy hurting the Justin Trudeau brand or even the fortunes of the Liberal Party?
We haven't seen definitive polling evidence yet that it is, but I think that will be coming out. Most Canadians have heard about the Chinese election interference issue. About 30% have not. Most, and this is going off multiple polls, Angus Reid, Abacus, Leger, also showing some similar numbers. They're asking different questions, but it's in the same vein that Canadians know about it. They're concerned about it. They don't think the election was stolen, you know, as we hear talked about in the United States, but they do worry, okay, is the election secure? Is China interfering? Did they turn over any seats? These are the questions they want to know. And they want a public inquiry. I think it was the Abacus poll last week. It showed about 67% of Canadians want a public inquiry into this. But when they broke it down by party, the Liberals were higher. 71% of Liberals said, yeah, have a public inquiry. The Conservatives were only higher by 2 points. 72% of Conservatives. It was New Democrat and Bloc supporters who were like, meh, we don't care. But Justin Trudeau's facing a supermajority of his own voters saying, we need more information. The longer he persists in saying, don't look behind the curtain, don't look at what the wizard is doing back there, the more Canadians are going to start questioning him and why he is obstructing and delaying so much.
Brian Trudeau's announcement today was about a Michelin plant in Nova Scotia, but he also made an announcement about Volkswagen coming to Ontario. As an Albertan, I have to ask, am I subsidizing the auto industry in central and eastern Canada?
Yes, you are. But look, the government also, it's tricky. I've been against corporate welfare and government subsidies for my whole adult life, as soon as I figured out what was going on. But these aren't necessarily direct subsidies the way we used to give out in the big bad old days where companies would literally be handed suitcases of money by governments. Often it's, in the case of the Nova Scotia government for this tire plant, it's a tax break that they're going to get for investing. So they're not going to collect taxes on the company that, well, if they left, they wouldn't get anyway. So they're going to get revenue elsewhere from the plant being there. There's not as much of the direct money going forward, just like with the oil sands, which also get kind of indirect subsidies. You know, the people that want the oil and gas industry shut down put out huge sums and say, this is the direct subsidy. No, it's often a tax break for exploration, or it's a tax break for this, or building infrastructure. And we don't know the numbers on the Volkswagen announcement yet. We just know that the plant's coming, and I've been told it's the biggest auto investment in Canadian history, which means it's multi-billion. It's bigger than $5 billion, which was the previous record. I think it's going to hurt whenever we find out what the government is offering. But my understanding is in both instances, it's more along the lines of, okay, you need a road to the plant, you need the land serviced, that sort of thing is happening, as opposed to here's a check, thank you for coming, which is what a lot of the American states do, whether it's for manufacturing or oil and gas exploration. It is direct subsidy. That doesn't tend to be the case in Canada, regardless of industry. But I suspect there's going to be a little bit of that in both of these.
Brian, the Trudeau government announced they would claw back more than $81 million in Canada health transfer payments, including almost $15 million from Alberta. Let me ask you, will this start a war between the feds and Alberta over healthcare?
It's going to be a war that will see Alberta, Quebec, and the federal government battling each other out. So it was, I think, just close to 82 million that they announced they're going to claw back last Friday. About half of that was Quebec, and Quebec is outraged. I think it was 14, 15 million for Alberta, and Alberta is outraged. BC is between Alberta and Quebec in terms of how much money, but they're working with the government to try and change their system. This is all about our people being overcharged. Most of it is in the area of diagnostics. And I'm trying to get a handle on what's happening in each province. You know, are you being charged extra if you go for an X-ray or a CAT scan or blood work? How is that happening, and why does the federal government want to claw back? Because they've never done this. And it's not as if we've had a sudden massive change in our respective provincial health systems. So Alberta has said, this is wrong. You are not looking at this in the right way. Our system in place is robust. But the Trudeau government is determined to do this. You know, when I heard about this, I thought there was a bit of politics at play, and I still think there is. They've been hard against the Ford government, well, for their proposals to follow Alberta's lead and BC's lead in terms of the surgeries in private clinics. But I think it's $30,000 that Ontario is being clawed back. So they're not, unless it's just for political gain, they're not going to go, you know, try and target Ontario by taking money from Alberta. So the feds have obviously decided that they're going to look at this in a different way than they have before. Over the last 5 years, I don't think Alberta's had anything clawed back, whereas BC, it's been in the $13 to $16 million range each year. Quebec, $8 to $9 million. The other provinces, not much at all. And then suddenly, boom, they changed the rules. 81 million. 14, 15 million for Alberta, that is going to start a war for sure.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Palm Springs, California.
Thank you, Hal.